To expedite an orderly and safe flow of IFR departures at busy terminal areas, Instrument Departure Procedures, or DPs, were created. These procedures and charts simplify departure for you and controllers, provide a transition between the airport and en route structure, as well as reduce frequency congestion. For example, prior to DPs, a clearance might have sounded like this.
Cessna 385 X-Ray Yankee cleared to the Salt Lake City Airport as filed. Maintain 17,000. Maintain runway heading until reaching 9,000. Turn left heading 250. Intercept the 268-degree radial of Denver Vortac. Cross super intersection at or above 13,300. Denver departure will be 123.85, squawk 1425.
Imagine the time it would take and the problems it could cause to repeat this type of clearance for every aircraft taking off at places like JFK in New York, O'Hare in Chicago, Los Angeles International, or Denver International Airport. DPs help alleviate this communications congestion by consolidating several individual procedures into one standard procedure. This is what the clearance might sound like if you received it with an instrument departure procedure.
Cessna 385 X-Ray Yankee cleared to the Salt Lake City Airport, Denver 3 departure then as filed. Maintain 17,000, squawk 1425.
Notice that Denver 3 departure replaced several procedures in the previous clearance. This not only saves communication time, but makes it less likely you'll receive a clearance you don't understand. Clearances for instrument departure procedures are issued at the option of ATC. If you don't have the graphic or textual information for the DP with you, you should not accept the clearance. If you don't want to use a DP, you should indicate no DP in the remarks section of your flight plan. All instrument departure procedures provide you with obstacle clearance. DPs can be either textual or graphic. Textual procedures, referred to as IFR departure procedures outside the U.S., exist only for obstacle clearance and can normally be found at the bottom of Jeppesen Airport charts. If ATC does not assign a graphic DP or other instructions, you can use the textual DP for obstacle clearance to depart the airport and, in some cases, to transition to the en route structure. The FAA is converting some complex textual departure procedures into graphic procedures to improve situational awareness. Graphic procedures are published as separate charts and can be filed as part of a flight plan. When a graphic departure procedure is created only for obstacle clearance, it is labeled obstacle and may contain the statement, if not assigned a departure procedure by ATC, this procedure may be flown to provide obstacle clearance. ATC departure procedures, referred to as SIDs outside the U.S., do not have the obstacle label. These procedures also provide obstacle clearance, but are established primarily to simplify pilot-controller communications, expedite the flow of traffic, and to help with noise abatement. Due to the dynamic nature of instrument procedures and charts, you may see more changes to DPs in the future. Now let's take a look at a few typical DPs and see how they are constructed and what each part means to you. For ease of access, Jeppesen files DPs with all the other charts serving the terminal area. The chart date, index number, and in some cases the effective date are listed at the top of the chart. Notice that the 10-3 type chart index numbers indicate DPs. A departure procedure is often named after the last fix for the common portion of the procedure prior to the departure transitions. In this case, Merrick intersection. This particular procedure is called the Merrick 3 departure. When a significant change in the procedure occurs, the name changes to the next higher number. At the next major revision, this DP will be renamed the Merrick 4 departure. Obstacle graphic or ATC DPs are one of two types, either pilot nav or vector. The most common graphical depiction is the pilot nav DP, where you, as the pilot, have the primary responsibility for navigation. And the other is the vector DP, where a controller vectors or directs you to fly a certain heading in order to intercept a fix or radial along the flight path. Since this is a pilot nav DP, it is noted near the name of the procedure. The name of this chart is the Merrick 3 departure, which serves the Meadows Airport at Bakersfield, California. As was mentioned earlier, a DP provides an obstacle-free flight path. This is based, however, on your aircraft climbing at 200 feet per nautical mile after it crosses the end of the runway at least 35 feet above the ground. A slope of 152 feet per nautical mile is assessed for any obstacles. If none penetrate this slope, the 200-foot per mile climb gradient gives you a minimum of 48 feet of obstacle clearance for each mile of flight. When an obstacle, such as rising terrain, penetrates this gradient, obstacle avoidance procedures must be specified in either a textual or graphic format. One of these procedures is to incorporate a climb gradient greater than 200 feet per nautical mile. If you filed and expect to be assigned the Gorman transition, the minimum climb gradient is 220 feet per nautical mile to 9,500 feet. Note that the climb gradient is in feet per nautical mile. Since your VSI only measures feet per minute, you must convert the climb gradient into something which is easily measured. Jeppesen provides this information in a convenient table for various ground speeds. For example, if your ground speed is 100 knots, you must maintain a climb rate of at least 367 feet per minute. Pilot nav DPs usually consist of departure routes identified by bold lines and transition routes identified by dashed lines. The departure routes all terminate at a fix, in this case, the Merrick intersection, where the transition routes begin. A transition route name usually corresponds to the name of the fix where the transition route ends. For example, the Gorman transition terminates at the Gorman Vortac. When DP charts cover large geographical areas, they may not be drawn to scale. This means distances cannot be accurately measured with a plotter. On some DPs, the distance from the airport or runway to the DP fix will be given, such as direct distance from Meadows Airport to Merrick intersection, 16 nautical miles. This value is included to help you determine the approximate mileage for flight planning purposes. However, actual track mileages are depicted along the transition routes. When filing an IFR flight plan that incorporates a DP, you should use the computer departure code, including the departure name and, if appropriate, transition name. For example, if you're using the Merrick 3 departure to Merrick intersection and then proceeding en route from there, the code MARIC3.MARIC should be used on the flight plan. If the flight is composed of a departure and transition route, such as the Gorman transition, the code MARIC3.GMN should be used. By using the computer codes, you not only help the flight service station specialist, but you also help yourself. Since the computer codes won't have to be looked up, the specialist spends less time entering the flight plan into the computer. This should enable you to receive your clearance in a minimal amount of time. You must carefully review any departure procedure, required performance and equipment criteria. Some high-performance procedures are depicted here. The other type of instrument departure procedure is the vector DP. An example of this type of DP is the Denver 3 departure. Notice that this DP does not contain any departure or transition routes. Instead, the controller provides vectors to any one of several fixes. When filing a vector DP, a depicted termination fix where the filed or assigned en route structure begins should be in your flight plan. This type of departure can be used by various types of aircraft. Vector DPs require two-way radio communication, and the lost communications procedures detailed in the FARs apply unless lost comm procedures are published for the departure. In the case of the Denver 3 departure, if communication is lost, you must comply with the procedure titled Lost Communications Procedure Only. Let's take a brief look at the relationship between a graphic DP and a textual DP. Notice the high initial minimum en route altitudes in this graphic departure procedure. Now let's look at the associated textual departure procedure. Note the altitude requirement for aircraft departing westbound from Denver between the 234 and 312 degree radials to ensure obstacle clearance. If you're flying this textual DP for your initial departure, you must climb in the Denver VOR holding pattern until at or above 11,500 feet before proceeding westbound. Pilot nav and vector DPs have a number of advantages for IFR departures, including reduced workload for both pilots and controllers. Remember, all DPs make your climb out safer by providing an obstruction-clear flight path when you depart the airport. In the case of pilot nav DPs, vector DPs, and some textual DPs, this extends to your transition to the en route structure.